with us. Abba Eban has been part of the history of Israel since the beginning. He has known all of its leaders and influential figures. He was ambassador to the United Nations in the beginning in 1948. He served as foreign minister. He was a member of the Labor Party that Yitzhak Rabin headed when he died. He has known Yitzhak Rabin through all the victories at Israel, through all of the challenges, and I'm pleased to have him here on this program this evening to remember his fallen friend. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Tell me, you saw Dr. Kissinger talk about the transformation. You knew Yitzhak Rabin, pointed him out, were part of the leadership that saw him early as a young man. What was it you saw in him then?
He's a man who went under very many fluctuations. I appointed him as Israeli ambassador to the United States. And then I saw him in the Six-Day War, and later on in his new dispensation. And it seems to me that Henry was right. In the last 2 or 3 years of his life, he transformed himself. I think that when he became prime minister, he must have sat down in his very analytical way, asked himself what to do with this responsibility, and decided that there was a window of opportunity in the Arab world of which he hadn't thought very much before. He had been rather hawkish, rather abrasive about Israel's neighboring world. And he suddenly decided to put all of the intensity of his personality at work, how to get Israel integrated somehow into the Arab world. There was already a treaty with Egypt. Well, why not try with the Palestinians? Why not try with Jordan? And he devoted himself to this with a kind of exclusive obsession that this was his mission, to see that Israel was no longer isolated in its region or in the world.
When did you first know him? When did you first hear the name? Can you remember Yitzhak Rabin?
I first heard the name when, of course, he became the commander of our forces. And after that, when he retired from that job, our prison ambassador in London said to me, you know, it would be a good idea if you got him into the embassy in Washington, which became vacant at that time. And I recommended that to the cabinet, and it was unanimously adopted. And he served 5 years in Washington. Now, I would not say that that was his best period, because he was very good at commanding others, not very good at being commanded by others. Hierarchical systems no longer
more soldier than diplomat at that time,
right, yes. He didn't suffer fools gladly. The trouble is he didn't suffer anybody gladly. So that ended, and he came back to Israel. But behind him was all the glamour and all the glory of the Six-Day War. Then he became Minister of Defense. And those periods somehow pale into insignificance compared with this sudden obsessive intensity with which he threw himself at the Arab world and said, we've got to get agreements with the Arab world.
What has to happen now in order to continue his mission?
Well, first of all, the very moving funeral was much more than a ceremony. I think it's a very important element in what happens afterwards. This outpouring of international prestige, of affection, of admiration, and of the pathos of his end, the human drama. And he was a man at the very, in the full flow of his life, at the very height of his success, at the very moment when he was celebrating his success. He sung a song of peace. He'd never sung anything before. I didn't. Rabin singing had never occurred to me at any time. And that to be cut off there, there's a cruelty, there's a pathos there. But beyond that, I believe that the fact that he died amidst such a demonstration of admiration for him and compassion for his family, I think that's going to accompany Mr. Peres in his onward journey. And it's not going to be easy for anybody to undo what Rabin did. He also left behind commitments, and I think those are going to be honored, because I don't believe any opposition will be able to go back on them.
Someone said today that clearly, because he was unique, because he was the man in '67 who'd conquered the West Bank and who'd conquered Jerusalem and who had conquer the Sinai and had did all that he had done, that he was uniquely able to negotiate, to return that land for peace. Does Peres have to find a partner that will give the same security equation?
I don't think that Peres has been correctly diagnosed in all the talk shows that I heard today. I don't think that Spig got it right. I wouldn't say that the essence of Peres is to be a visionary. He has a visionary rhetoric, perhaps. But the essence of Peres is the creation of solid, concrete facts. For example, the United States once withheld its weaponry. Off Peres went and came back with an agreement with France, a whole mass of mirages and mystères. And then he decided that we must not be dependent on the outside world for arms. So he founded and established our aircraft industry. Yeah. He then thought that we ought to examine the world of deterrence. So he really created the Dimona reactor. And then he was Minister of Finance. And in a very short time, our inflation went down from 100% to about 9%. I think the essence of it is, we call it, in Israel, there's a phrase called bitsuist, a man who gets things done. And I think that is his real virtue. He does not have, and doesn't carry with him, that supreme kind of authority. That was what Rabin was, authority. Gravitas, I think one of your interlocutors called it. And therefore he'll have a job. But I think that he will co-opt other people. There are, in his own team, there is Barak, who was one of the chiefs of staff. There is Balin, who was the creative mind behind the Oslo Agreement.
Fair to say that on this day that Yitzhak Rabin was buried in Jerusalem, that you are still optimistic about the possibility of peace?
Yes, well, it is my optimism which I think won Rabin's heart for me after a very long period, because he read an article that I had written in the Israeli press in which I said, hey, you know, the peace process is a success story. And I made a whole list of the achievements. We have an agreement with Egypt, we have a peace with the Palestinians, we have a treaty with Jordan, we are penetrating the Gulf area with Oman, Muscat, Bahrain. Saudi Arabia has really given up the boycott. He said he really liked that, and we're not making enough of it. And from that moment onward, he and I were very close, and he reached out to me when the United Nations celebrated its 50th anniversary and asked me to come along and join the delegation to symbolize continuity. Now, at one time when he was ambassador in Washington, he recommended that we should close down our mission in the United Nations. But here he came and was received by about 26 heads of state. And he said, hey, this is a great place. And in other words, he was capable of adapting himself to his responsibilities.
I thank you for joining us on this evening and reminding us and remembering Yitzhak Rabin. Thank you very much. Abba Eban.